Welcome to the Pan-Africanist, Amani Africa's podcast on African Union current affairs and multilateral issues of concern and interest for Africa and the African Union. In the course of this year, we have been covering developments around the African Union Commission election expected to take place in February 2025 as part of our coverage of this crucial election coming at a critical moment in African Union's journey. And globally speaking, we are pleased to have a conversation with some of the key candidates for the leadership of the African Union Commission. In this episode, I have the pleasure of sitting down with one of the candidates for the position of the African Union Commission Chairperson. This is His Excellency Mahamoud Youssouf, the Foreign Minister of Djibouti. I am sitting down with him for this conversation in Oran, Algeria, where the African Union Peace and Security Council is holding its 11th high-level seminar on its relationship with the African 3+ members of the UN Security Council, which is currently being chaired by Mahamoud Youssouf, the Foreign Minister of Djibouti. I hope with this conversation, you are able to learn a lot about Mahamoud Youssouf and his observations and insights on the state of things in the African Union and indeed in the African Union Commission.
Minister, first of all, I would like to thank you as Amani Africa for making time to have this interview with us. Amani Africa is a research organization that works on African Union affairs, and it is within that context that we are having this interview to profile candidates who are campaigning for the position of the chairperson of the African Union Commission. The first question that I would like to pose to you is, what is your vision of the African Union under your leadership as African Union chairperson if you are voted into that position?
Thank you for inviting me on Amani Africa. Yes, I am running for the position of the chairperson of the African Union Commission. And I think that when you enter this race, you need to have a vision. That's natural. What kind of vision should I propose to make a difference? That's my main goal. And my vision and my plan for the African Union relies first on what has been achieved. I mean, I'm not pretending to reinvent the wheel, but I would like to start from where others, managed to bring our common agenda items and start with the performance of the first 10-year plan. We have all read the report. The execution level is not more than 37%. And the first pillar of my vision will be, how can we work differently so that we can, increase and raise that level of execution and performance? It takes better coordination between the different components of the Commission, the chair, deputy chair, and the commissioners. And under every position, there are so many committees, directions, and other institutions that have to deliver. I mean, if we want to work on the basis of deliverables, so that chain of authority, the way the Commission works, with regard to all its institutions, have to be revisited. That's number one. Second, I think that the low performance of our decision implementation comes from the lack of synergy between the Commission and the RECs. Regional economic communities have a huge responsibility when it comes to peace and security, economic development, trade development, and the Commission should not work in silo and leave the RECs, do their job, and at the end of the day, the relationship between the Commission and the RECs becomes, very loose, and there's no real, dynamic interaction between them. That has to change. The third point on the vision I would like to propose is to mobilize and foster the resources. Without resources, it's very difficult to really implement what we decided to implement. When I'm talking about resources, I will come back to this when the question of resources will come. But it is critical. In the vision, the mobilization of resources is central. You cannot envisage and contemplate the possibility of really being completely independent in terms of ownership of the programs while you're just waiting for the support of the partners. That has to change. The way it will change, we'll see. I'm not saying that they will change it in overnight because there are so many hindrances and resistance from member countries themselves. So I will have to work on that. Last but not least, I think it's very important. Our continent is really not blessed with the kind of stability, peaceful environment that we can see in Latin America, Asia, and other parts. Although Europe now is facing problem with Ukraine. I think the vision I will carry will certainly give a very good margin, a good space to peace and security. Because without a peaceful environment, it's useless to talk about trade development, etc., etc., etc. So these are the four components I would like really to introduce in them a certain way of working, some ideas, and bring about something that will be different from what has been done so far. That's why I'm saying it's very difficult to talk about all the vision at the same time, but I have very clear ideas about those 3-4 objectives I would like to reach.
I think your point about the level of execution is extremely important.
Yeah.
One of the issues that arises is, for example, what are the factors and forces that are impeding the level of implementation of decisions? Does it have to do with the process of decision making itself, or does it have to do with what happens after decisions have been made? Or does it have to be a combination of both what happens in the process of decision making and what happens after decision making? Where do you think are the efforts that need to be mobilized in order to enhance that improvement that you rightly pointed out? If we are to succeed at an African Union, we need to enhance and elevate implementation.
Let me, stand on one very, critical issue when it comes to decision making and decision implementation. If you have hundreds of decisions, hundreds of problems that you have to resolve, I think your efforts could be, at a certain point, become not visible. Your efforts, are drowned in the, volume of all those decisions. Let me give you an example. When we have a summit in Addis Ababa in February, you see the agenda of the summit? Exactly. We have almost 30, 40 items on the agenda. The heads of state have no time to focus on those items that are all very important. But that's the upstream decision-making process, number one. Then when you have decisions are made, generally speaking, is the PRC that made the decision. Heads of states, come for the photo. The PRC are the one who. So when the commission is faced with so many decisions to be implemented, they waste momentum, they waste time in trying to have all kind of expertise around that decision, and then the reports come. And there are no body to read those reports, to try to find the right recipe to implement them, etc., etc. So it's very important that we alleviate that burden from the Commission. Let the Commission focus on very specific issues. That's very important. Yeah, let the CTCs do their work. Let the CTCs do their work. Let us help, all the mechanisms that we have ourselves, put in place, do their work. All the, the human rights commissions. You have the secretariat for the peer review mechanism. You have so many mechanisms. I think they need, even the Pan-African Parliament. They need to get, that confidence and trust to make their decisions. And when they bring it up to the policy organs just endorse them and focus on 1, 2, 3 priority issues. And the heads of state, when they come, they have to focus on 1 or 2 issues, pressing issues. And then the decision is made, and then the time frame should be given immediately so that the implementation, becomes really a kind of not business as usual, but with deliverables. That's, the method of work that we need to go for, and stop this nonsense of having 40, 50, 60, issues with so many decisions, and we're not in a position to implement them. And then we complain, so many decisions, the Commission is not working. I think let's focus on. We have to really have a very tight agenda for the Assembly, for the Executive Council, and the Commission, and we work on 1, 2, 3, 4. We have the reforms already in place. We know where we have to go when it comes to the resource mobilization. 0.2% on imports is something our heads of states have decided, but only 17 countries implemented. More than 30 countries are just, turning a blind eye on this reform that they themselves adopted. Then, on peace and security issues, everybody is jealous about its sovereignty. You cannot resolve very intricate problems internally when it comes, for instance, to if every member country is saying, okay, this is my space of sovereignty. Look how the European Union is functioning. The space of sovereignty is really shrinking. If we want to be efficient at continental level, we have to, give up some of our sovereign spaces, so that if there is something wrong in our countries, we accept that the organization come to prevent and help any crisis to evolve. This is not the case. We leave the thing, just rot until the crisis is out of hand. How can we give up some of our sovereignty space to accommodate the African Union mechanism, so that early warning becomes the key element of our policies when it comes to political problems, crises, security issues, etc., etc. These are very complicated problems. I'm not saying that I will resolve them, in one shot, but I think I have some ideas around them.
We will come to the question of the degree to which, member states have to cede sovereignty and how much that would contribute to achieving the ideals of the African Union. But before we do that, one question that I would like to ask you is, in terms of you as a candidate, what makes you stand out and therefore make you capable of garnering the required level of votes to assume this responsibility?
I think that I have a better understanding of the challenges. Why? I have been in this business for so many years. I have been attending the African Union meetings, conferences, seminars for the past 30 years. And I'm Foreign Minister of my country for 2 decades. So I think that I have a better understanding of all the complexities. And I have also a better understanding of the sensitivities of member countries on particular issues. This is very important. When you work on the basis of consensus, you want to have every single country on board on strategic matters, issues. I think you need to understand before even you rush to the solution, what could be the reaction of that or that country. Learn the history, know about the social configuration and fabrics of that country, know about the relationship between the country and its environment. What we have noticed in the past 30 years, when a country fall deep in a crisis, the first problem to resolve is the neighboring country's position on that crisis, what we call the unity of purpose. If there is no unity of purpose between the neighboring countries with regard to the crisis of that specific country, there won't be any solution. Or even if the whole continent comes around the country to help it, it won't be able to help that country. Neighboring countries are very, very important to strike any deal, any peace in a specific country. Just to give you the example of Somalia. For many years, we as neighboring countries were fighting against each other on Somalia. And Somalia, for many years, did not find its way to a stable situation. The same is happening in Sudan today. And these are repetitive, scenarios that we see even in Libya and so on and so forth. So when we have any crisis in a country, in a given country, the first thing we should work on is the neighboring country's position about that crisis. And then this is the first step towards the final solution. So I understand those complexities. I understand that dynamics. I have been confronted during my career as a diplomat to all those issues, not only on the continent, even in the Middle East. So I think that that singles me out when it comes to the other candidates. Second point is that I'm still in action. I'm still working. I'm still active. Well, it's not the case for other candidates. In action and working in the multilateral diplomacy. I'm not talking about business and other.
Sure. Yeah.
Multilateral diplomacy, which is the center of interest for our race. The third point, which is very important, I look at myself as a bridge between different cultures. When I say a bridge between different cultures, because my country is a kind of crossroad country between south or north, east and west. So I have that culture. And I have also maybe the chance to communicate in several languages. That's, I think, some of the comparative advantages that I can be proud of and put forward to say that that's what make me different from other candidates.
Thank you very much for that, Minister. You mentioned two important points, one relating to the role of REX. The other one relates to the role of neighboring countries. One of the issues in terms of the functioning of the African Union indeed has been the relationship between the regional economic communities and the African Union. And the regional economic communities are closer to neighboring countries. That is the level at which where the role of neighboring countries comes in. One of the examples from recent experience, one, regional economic communities are not the same.
Yes.
They don't have the same legal standards.
Yes.
Some of the legal standards that they have are not at the same level as the African Union. And therefore, the idea of the extent to which you can be able to achieve that level of coherence between the AU and REX is still a work in progress.
Yes.
So, how do you deal with that variance in terms of the level of development, the level of institutionalization?
Yeah. I understand your question very well. I think we have to adapt our leadership as a commission, chair, deputy chair, commissioners, when it comes to the level of development, either legally speaking, economic-wise, trade-wise. I think regions are not at the same level. I really concur with you on that. That's why I think we have to adapt our interaction as commission with all those regional economic communities. If I take IGAD as an example, when it comes to economic integration, trade volume, etc., you see, we are really falling back of let's say continental standard. We have been dealing with peace problems, security problems, internal crises, problems between countries that we have completely put aside and forgotten. The core principle upon which the Abuja summit created those REX so that we reach this goal of an integrated Africa. Integrated Africa on the basis of building blocks, and the building blocks are the REX. So I'm sure that if I'm elected, I will not have the same, let's say, recipe when I will treat with the SADC or ECOWAS in comparison with the level, to which IGAD reached when it comes to integration. So adaptation is number one principle. Then, of course, listening to those economic communities. Of course, we will work on the basis of the principle of subsidiarity, but it doesn't mean that the Commission will just look down on them or tell them, okay, you have to report to me and you have to, listen to my guidance. No, this is not the kind of leadership, because we need to have a more cohesive interaction with the REX. So the REX are, mature enough to tell us as the Commission, this is where we want the Commission to intervene, and then we will bring up and come up with our leadership on the guidance of the REX. The principle of subsidiarity should work in both ways. Not saying, okay, you have to report back, you have to, no. I think that it's important for two reasons. The number one reason is that these countries know better than the Commission their own affairs, and they know how to handle them and deal with them. So we have to listen to them, and we have to adapt ourselves to the region's, strategy and policy when it comes to trade integration, inflow or outflow of goods and individuals, movement of individuals. We have to security, customs arrangements. There are so many different, formulas in our region. So adaptation is number one principle. Second, subsidiarity, yes, but in both ways. The principle works both ways. It's not only, down to up approach, but it has to be also to down approach. It has to be that way. Then finally, I think that at the Commission level, our different commissioners and institutions will have maybe to upgrade themselves and really be at the level of the expectations of those regions. They have to, and I think that they have to be available. They need to rely on competent personnel and staff, and they have also to really be at the really available and be really listening quietly and with sincerity when these regions tells us, no, you commission, you did not do your job. You have to do this and that. I think we should not take it, for granted. We really need a better interaction. I have seen, during my different meetings, very tense relationship between the chair of the commission and some of the REX members. I have seen tough, rhetorics, and I think that is because the channel of communication was abandoned long ago. So you have to put that channel again in operation. I will make sure that we have that kind of interaction of the REX with the REX. Sorry.
Thank you very much. One thing that you pointed out is the kind of condition that needs to prevail within the commission, right? You made reference to issues relating to what kind of working arrangement, what level of expertise, competence that needs to exist, and so on. So, from an institutional perspective, what is your assessment of the state of the African Union Commission, and where do you think are the pain points, the pressure points that need to be dealt with and addressed? What is your diagnosis of?
We have to start with the SACA process. You've heard about SACA process. That process should be implemented, but implemented in a very transparent way. When you have a personnel, a staff that has a low morale, you cannot get the best out of them. So you have to be very, very cautious about that, and we need to look at the overall status of the personnel. When you rely on short-term contract personnel for very important issues, you cannot create among them that kind of loyalty, that kind of confidence you need when you want them to come up with deliverables. So short-term contracts should be completely banned from the union. Then you will have all the personnel that is waiting for many years now, their promotions. You have to speed up and accelerate them. And I hope that it will be resolved before the new commission comes in. That's my hope, wishful thinking. The way also people are working in silos, that's not good. Of course, commissioners are elected. Yes, the chair and the deputy chair also are elected, but they cannot continue to work in silos. There must be a working methodology that is different than what I'm hearing. Third, and I think that's also very important, the number of staff is not that big, because we think that, in the European Union, there are 37,000. And there's 27 countries. 1,300 is not a big number. It's not a big number. So we need to look a way of strengthening a number of structures that we do have, with the recruitment, good personnel, well qualified. That's also very important. If you cannot rely on qualified, skilled personnel, you cannot expect any deliverables from them. The fourth issue, of course, is it's not understandable that the staff has no pension fund. They're working many years, 10 years, 20 years, and then they just take their end of mission allowances and they go. you do not create, loyalty and sincerity when you have people that feel that they are not, properly considered as workers, as human beings, as part of this
international
service. So the UN has that. Many. The Arab League has that. So it's important that we come up with something, just to give them, more confidence. Personnel issue is very important. SACA, number one. Look on how we can recruit more youngsters in a number of institutions to strengthen their capacity. It's very important that also we look into the future of that personnel, pension fund, etc., etc. And we also need to, the African Union personnel, I think their income and the most badly paid when you compare them to other organizations, UN, Arab League, OIC. We have to revisit those things. We need to really give them hope. That's important. So these are, of course, the issue of accountability and transparency when it comes to management of resources. Mm-hmm. That is important. What I'm hearing is there are so many, abnormal things when it comes to, the way the resources are managed. That has to be changed. That has to change. And although I'm not directly managing the financial resources, if I'm elected as the chair, but I am responsible for the overall management. Accounting officer. I am the accountant. I will be the accounting officer. I'm signing the checks, doing all these things. So I have my saying when I see, things not going in the right direction. Say no, I cannot accept that. So I think accountability and transparency in resource management will be also one of my priorities. But member states are waiting for me, down the road, saying, okay, we have, provided all those resources. What are you doing with them? So I cannot just say, okay, the audit report has not been transmitted. We to buy some time, then said, okay, that auditing report, internal auditing report, is not implemented. I think that's the kind of thing that will change.
I think the point around the relationship, for example, with member states you mentioned, one of the things that you said is about power relations, particularly in terms of more authority being ceded in favor of the AU Commission. But there is also a question of trust, right? Because this point that you made about the issues of recruitment and their transparency, you put emphasis on that. Issues of procurement, which actually relates to financing. Raise issues about, whether you, as a member state, if you have issues on these areas, would you be willing to actually cede more power under those kinds of conditions? Or would you actually ask, maybe we need to create the conditions for ceding more power? Maybe you can even ask the question, have you used all the authority that has been given to you?
I think the central issue in this matter of transparency, accountability, the way things are managed, the central issue is confidence. You put it rightly. So the goal of the new commission will be to really create the condition so that member states, trust the commission and be ready to, be ready to give them confidence. For that, I have to improve their management. I have to show that I am much more transparent in the way I am handling the resources. I will have to be more equitable when it comes to recruitment. I will have to look into why some countries have reached their quota and sometimes they have gone beyond their quota and others are not. getting the right attention they need in terms of recruitment. They have to deal with that. And that's the way you create that sense of justice. And then when you create that sense of equity and justice, confidence comes back. And if member countries have confidence in the Commission, the powers the Commission needs comes, naturally and systematically. That's the way I think things can be improved.
Thank you very much. Moving into one of the issues that we touched on earlier, which is the resource damage. That is one of the challenges. You made a comparison between the African Union and the European Union. The African Union, huge ambition, huge mandate from regional economic integration, as you put it, to peace, security, and stability, to socioeconomic advancements and uplifting the living standard of our people. How do you think the resources required for delivering on Agenda 2063 would best be mobilized? Because of late, we have seen a decline of member states' contributions towards the Union, of course, understandably as a result of the broader economic challenge that member states are also facing. But how do you create value and that value proposition in order to expand the resource base of the African Union?
We have that formula that have been enacted in the process of reforms since 2017. As I said, 0.2%, 2% of eligible imports. It's not working properly because member countries feel that the burden is not shared in an equitable way. They're saying a few members are carrying most of the burden, financial burden. So we need to think about the better sharing of the burden.
Mm-hmm.
We have to work on that.
To basically look into the formula.
Yes, we have to look into the formula again. Because you cannot, rely on 5 countries out of 55 to support 40% and more of the budget. It's impossible. Now, on the 2025 budget that we have endorsed in Ghana, the statutory contribution don't go beyond 200 million. The whole budget is 600 million. Statutory contributions, is, slightly maybe a little bit more than 200 million. And 400 million has to be found somewhere else, from partners, from the private sector, from financial institution, and so on and so forth. If we do not revisit the issue of the burden sharing, we will be stuck with this situation. So that's number one. Second, we have also to explore other sources of financing. The private sector is ready to assist and help. They have their own forum now, institutionalized, the African private sector. They met several times. The last one was in Kigali. They can mobilize a lot of money. They just want to have that channel of communication and the confidence on the Commission.
But the AU doesn't have a strategy on.
We have to think about a strategy. Just to give you an example, the CDC got $100 million from the private sector to finance its programs. And it took, a few meetings and 1 or 2, opinion leaders on the continent to mobilize and foster 100 million for the CDC. There's a lot of money in the pension fund on the African continent, trillions. The pension fund, the South African pension fund have almost $1 billion in it. And so many others. There are those resources that are available. So it's very important that we create, bridges between the Commission, member state, and those sources of financing. We have to work out, that strategy that you mentioned. Then I think that it won't be useless also to think on innovative financing sources. at a certain period of time, I don't know, in Europe, for instance, when they were talking about how to finance aid programs on the continent, they decided to impose a small tax on air tickets. And these kind of things could be really some of the innovative way of financing our programs. I understand, the fatigue or the of member countries, in particular the 5 that are supporting. 5 countries, each of them pays 7.2% of the budget, 35 million a year. Imagine if you ask Morocco, Algeria to pay 50, 60 million next year, they would say no, share the burden with us. So that's how we can proceed. I'm not saying that I have the recipe right now, but these are some axes of we can reflect on in the near future. But what is very important when it comes to resources, we have to scale down gradually the support of the partners for our programs. We need to. We shouldn't wait for them to say, okay, I'm not going to finance your programs. We need, whenever the partner says, I don't have money to put in your program, voluntary contribution should be the first step. And then see other sources of financing, private sector, financial institutions, innovative way of mobilizing resources, small taxes here and there. So we need to find that. And it also touches to the space of sovereignty of countries. Again, I come back. You have to give up some of your space of sovereignty so that the organization really starts functioning properly.
You mentioned peace and security as the bedrock on which the other objectives of the Union can be built.
Yes.
You mentioned also that the state of peace and security on the continent at this point requires quite a lot of work, right? So one of the questions for you is, how differently will you be approaching the peace and security challenge facing the continent? Indeed, when you compare what the state of peace and security on the continent was 10 years or 15 years ago and what it is today, we have witnessed really a major deterioration in the state of peace and security. So how would you change, and what would you change in order to contain this deterioration and even reverse the deterioration of the peace and security situation?
Let me remind us about the instruments and the mechanisms we have to deal with peace and security issues. We have the APSA, we all know, the African Peace and Security Architecture, and then we have a number of mechanisms to support that strategy. Peace and Security Council, we have the Peace Fund, the Chief of Staff Committee, the Committee of Elders, etc., etc. Why is it not functioning? I think we need to focus on two priority issues: early warning and prevention.
Mm-hmm.
This one is not functioning properly.
True.
Early warning and prevention should take, the biggest, attention. Should give the biggest attention to that. We have a permanent observatory at the Commission level.
Yes.
It should be really the biggest, when it comes to peace and security, the biggest structure with personnel, capacity, means, so that early warning becomes really the day-to-day job of the Commission when it comes to peace and security. Let us make this observatory or structure operational. Really, I will do it. Second, the standby force. Why we have all regions have adopted, the principle of creating a standard. Every region, SADC has one, IGAD has one, etc., etc. It's very critical that those standby force be really ready for operations, and not wait for the UN Security Council to adopt a resolution and then to find the resources. so that they can finance the African peace operation. Yes, we got the 2719 now, 70% or 75% of African peace operation will be supported. Again, it's not completely, accepting some resistance and hindrances at the P5 level. And I think that on individual countries, individual capacities of countries should be in the first stage, brought about or bringing by countries to help the standby force to start working, not wait for the UN Security Council to find the resources. And it's a pity because we could have avoided all kind of humanitarian crises and wars in our regions if that standby force was really operational immediately when there is a crisis. Before the operationalization of that standby force, early warning and prevention. I think these are the two pillars on which we have to work very hard to really make a difference on peace and security. We have been talking, these 2 days about prevention, about how we can, reach that goal of silencing the guns by 2030. But I think the missing link in the whole process, the value chain of peacekeeping is, from my perspective, these two elements. We need to work on those two: early warning and standby force.
These two elements, for them to be effective and functional, they require, as you mentioned earlier on, to build on what you said. For African Union to function well, you clearly said that you need to build consensus.
Yes.
It looks like that is one of the things that looks to be missing at this point in time, and therefore the African Union not being at the forefront of responding to and mobilizing those engagements. So how do you go about creating that diplomatic foundation, which is the consensus building dimension of it, which has been the basis for effective response of the African Union? If you look at, for example, Sudan, you rightly mentioned as an example that there is no common view on the war and how to resolve the war. So how do we overcome the political dimension of the challenge beyond the technical and the institutional dimension?
It's not easy, but it starts with the regions. It starts with the regional economic community. Of course, the African Union and the Commission have to endorse what the region decides. Whether this decision is well accepted by members of the region or not, because when the region comes to a decision, we have to endorse it.
But doesn't that depend on whether it is in accordance with the rules of the African Union?
Of course, because and I don't think that regions, will make decisions that are contradictory to the rules and procedures of the African Union. I don't think so. Just to give you an example, when there were these unconstitutional changes of governments in the West, in West of Africa, in some countries, the region took the lead to handle those issues. ECOWAS met 1, 2, 3 times, decided that they will put under sanctions those countries, etc. And what did the African Union when the ECOWAS decided? The African Union endorsed that position. Of course, respectful, way of handling the issues, in accordance with the charter. I mean, the charter and the rules and procedures have to be respected. I think that's the prerequisite. I'm not, putting into question our charter and its provisions. No, I'm saying the region has to act very quickly. That's what they did. Of course, after that, the issue of the sanctions, complete sanctions on those countries were put into question. And then they revised that decision the region and said, okay, complete sanctions blockade will be eased and so on and so forth. But we really have to trust the region. And then if the region is really not delivering, is really stuck with some contradictory policies, then comes the African Union. That's what we did for Sudan. In the beginning, we had a quartet, and then the quartet IGAD was not doing well, etc., etc. And then the African Union came up with a high-level panel and said, okay, let's do a common platform, IGAD, African Union, to handle the issue. That's the best way, to deal with that. When the region fails, the African Union comes up, steps forward, and say, okay. But the worst thing that we have to avoid when it comes to our own crises and issues is to let the non-Africans to mess up with all our issues. When I say non-Africans, there are so many coming from everywhere, and they start to mess up with our own problems. And when the African crisis issues are internationalized, then you have to be sure that you won't get any solution for decades, generations. So we need a defensive shield against international interference, but we need regions to take responsibility, shoulder that responsibility, and the African Union comes as a support. That's the best way to function. And of course, we with due respect to the provisions of our charter. Without that, I think we will be in the unlawful side of our history.
We're wrapping up, Minister. The point that you have made with respect to Sudan, including, for example, the humanitarian crisis that it has created and so on and so forth, this has become now the largest internal displacement crisis in the world. The risk of the country actually fragmenting is huge and collapsing as well, with dire consequences for the region, because Sudan is surrounded by 7 countries, some of which have already difficult political situation. And whatever happens in Sudan wouldn't be limited to inland, it would spill over into the Red Sea, affecting the international community as a whole. So the stakes are very high in Sudan, but the level of political and diplomatic response doesn't seem to match that. And from citizens' perspective, there are increasing disillusionment about the African Union. Where is the African Union? They ask, what is the African Union? What is the value that the African Union is adding from a citizen's perspective? How do you respond to these gaps between the promise of the African Union and its delivery, particularly from a perspective of citizens, including on the most basic issues of protection?
We have to improve our action in terms of humanitarian interference. That one is missing in our action. When the situation goes so badly and the humanitarian situation is so dire, I think the African Union should step up and say, okay, we have the right to protect the civilians. That one is missing. We have to work on that. Number 2, what is going on in Sudan is very, very, let's say, rare situation. The army is fighting each other. 2 armies. Exactly. This is a symmetric war. So we have to, we deal in on the continent, generally speaking, on asymmetric wars. We have militias, etc. Here we have, a symmetric war between 2 conventional armies. So the magnitude of the problem is even, bigger. And they are fighting with heavy weaponry. They are destroying the infrastructure, killing civilians. So you see, this is a very particular problem in the Sudan. And we haven't, for the past 2-3 decades, haven't seen such a situation on the continent. You see DRC, you have militias in Eastern Congo. So, and we send UN and African forces now, SAMI DRC, to try to stabilize. It's a situation that we can handle to a certain extent, so that the level of human suffering be as low as possible until we get to the political solution. But here it's two armies. This is a symmetric war. This is a new situation. That's why the African Union seems helpless. But still, the political process is ongoing. I think the Peace and Security Council visited Port Sudan, tried to come up with advice and consultation with the Sovereign Council. IGAD also, myself, I went there. We're trying to bring them back to IGAD and help them through IGAD. That's the message I carried to President Al-Burhan. And also we have to send messages to other countries, non-Africans, interfering in the affairs of the Sudan. We have to, and we said it several times. So I think that the scenario unfolding in Sudan is, as you said, one of the worst scenarios, because this is a symmetric war between two armies. They're using all kinds of weapons. They are destroying the country, piece by piece. And it's as if the Somali scenario or the Libyan scenario is repeating itself. So the African Union will have to really rise up to the challenge. There's a committee of heads of state that have been proposed recently by President Museveni, by 5 heads of state. I think that committee should start working very quickly. We advise that the heads of states know at that level, start really acting on the Sudanese issue. But it is very complicated.
Just last 2 questions. One relates to question of leadership. Do you think that African countries are doing enough in terms of providing the level of leadership that this moment requires on the continent?
Yes, we have to remain optimistic. Look always on the field side of the glass of the cup. Don't look at the empty side, because if you want to be a leader of any institutions, you have to really have that kind of positive mindset, that positive vibration and optimistic way of dealing with issues. I'm not saying that it will be really an easy task, but I think the leadership on the continent, our heads of states and governments, are really making progress in terms of giving Africa the status it deserves. When they managed to get us a seat at the G20, it wasn't an easy task. Now we're working very hard to have permanent seats at the UN Security Council. We are also really making good progress in getting our deserved, representation in the boards of IMF, World Bank, etc. We are really involved in BRICS and Global South with very influential countries. South Africa, Ethiopia, Egypt, and others. I think we can contemplate the future with a certain level of optimism. Now we are capable of making our voice loudly heard. And then once we are heard, we will have to work on the best way of, advancing our interests. But it is done step by step. I think look at from where we came, and look into the future with that sense of optimism and very, very positive mindset. This is the kind of leadership I would like to bring into the Commission.
Excellent. One last point, building on that, very last one. The world is changing. Power relations are changing. The global order is in flux. And then this obviously presents an opportunity for the continent, but at the same time, it also brings perils, including the ones that you mentioned, where African issues become a flashpoint for global contestation. And once they get internationalized, as you rightly pointed out, it becomes almost impossible to get resolution for decades, for generations. So how should the African Union position itself in order to make sure that the cohesion of the union, the cohesion of member states is sustained and is mobilized in such a way that it would shield, as you rightly put it, it would shield these situations from being entangled in global competition, while at the same time enabling Africa to project its interests on the global scale.
The first, point I think is critical is to stay away from alliances. We need to stay away from alliances, ideological alliances. That's number one. The second,
which is non-aligned.
Non-aligned. We have to stay away. Second, I think that the African continent, African member states, have to chart their own way. That's what we are working on. Agenda 2063 is, for us, our own roadmap to the way we would like to chart for ourselves. We have a number of objectives, goals to reach in terms of education, agriculture, industrial transformation, cybersecurity, good governance, etc. This is our own way that we are trying to take to reach those goals. Stay away from alliances, chart our own way. Third, very important also, is to create the conditions on the continent to be self-reliant. How can we be self-reliant? It's very easy, but we need strong political engagement. Very easy. You have so many resources in every country. So start by transforming your resources. Start by exporting.
Value addition.
Value addition. You have to focus on export, because to get currency, to get resources, how China did to reach this level of development. They focused on industrial production and then export. Export. We have so many things to export. So charting our own way, relying on our resources, adding value to our resources, and then everything will just fall, in place. But it takes, political will, it takes cohesion, coherence, and it takes solidarity. So if we want to see the CFTA work, solidarity is number one. Solidarity is critical. So these are some ideas I just wanted to share with you.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
We wish you all the very best.
Thank you very much.
And we hope that we will have another
round of discussions
when the time comes.
When the time comes.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Very, very best wishes.
Thank you very much.
To you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank once again His Excellency Mahamoud Youssouf, the Foreign Minister of Djibouti, and one of the candidates for the position of the African Union Commission Chairperson, whose election would take place in February 2025 within the framework of the African Union Summit. I also wish to thank each and every one of you for making time to watch and listen to this episode of the Pan-Africanist, Amani Africa's podcast on current African Union affairs and multilateral issues of concern and interest for Africa and the African Union. I look forward to have you all again for another episode of the Pan-Africanist. Until then, I do hope that you all keep well.